All right, everyone, welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's pretty much guaranteed to be on your UPSC exams, and that is India's air quality.
Yeah, absolutely.
To really get into this, we're going to be taking apart the World Air Quality Report 2024.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know, this is a massive report. It covers, I think, over 138 countries, 40,000 monitoring stations.
Right. It really is comprehensive.
Yeah. So we're not going to bore you with all the data, but what we're going to try to do is give you the insights that really matter most for aspiring civil servants.
Exactly. Think of this as your daily dose of UPSC mains current affairs, but with a little extra something that might just help you in the prelims, too.
Okay, so big picture. India ranks as the 5th most polluted country globally.
Yes.
Now, I know that sounds kind of alarming, but it's actually an improvement from last year.
It is.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's kind of a mixed bag, right? On the one hand, any improvement is a good thing. It shows that maybe the things they're doing are having some effect. But it's really important to remember that India's PM2.5 levels, those tiny little particles that can really mess with your health, are still way above what the World Health Organization says is safe.
Right. And for those who might not be super familiar with PM 2.5, we're talking about those microscopic particles that can go deep into your lungs, even into your bloodstream, and they can cause all sorts of problems like breathing issues and heart problems.
Absolutely.
So progress, yes, but definitely not time to celebrate yet.
No, not quite.
I guess it's kind of like, when you're prepping for the UPSC and you see your mock test scores going up.
Right.
It's good, but you're not quite at that level you need to be at to really succeed.
Exactly. Keep pushing.
Okay, let's focus in on a spot that's always in the news, Delhi.
Yeah.
The report says it's the most polluted capital in the world.
Unfortunately, it's been that way for 6 years in a row.
6 years in a row.
That raises some serious questions.
It does, doesn't it? Why is Delhi always at the top of this list?
It's not just cars and factories, although those are big factors.
Right.
Delhi's location plays a big role.
Ah, okay.
It's in the Indo-Gangetic Plain. It's pretty flat, and that means pollutants get trapped.
I see.
And then, especially in winter, there's not much wind.
Makes things worse.
Exactly. It's like a perfect storm for bad air.
Right. So the report also looks at the sources of all this pollution in India.
Yes.
And one that really stood out, was crop stubble burning.
Yes, especially during certain times of year.
Yeah. They say it's responsible for a crazy 60% of PM 2.5 levels when pollution is at its peak.
60%, that's a huge chunk.
It's massive.
It's a recurring problem in discussions about India's air quality.
So explain this to me, why is this happening?
Oh, it's mainly in the states near Delhi, like Punjab and Haryana.
Okay.
Farmers there, they burn the leftover stuff from their crops to clear the fields.
Makes sense.
But the wind carries all that smoke and pollution straight to Delhi.
Wow, so what they're doing in one state is directly affecting the air in another state.
Exactly, it's all connected.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It really shows how these issues are all linked together.
Absolutely.
So, okay, we've got this big source of pollution, crop stubble burning. What's being done about it?
Well, the report mentions the National Clean Air Program, or NCAP. They're aiming to bring those PM 2.5 levels down 20 to 30% by 2024.
Ambitious.
It is, and one of their strategies is encouraging the use of something called biodecomposers.
Biodecomposers?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm familiar with that. What are those?
Think of them like a good bacteria solution.
Okay,
They're
wow.
sprayed onto the crop stubble, and they help it break down faster, turning it into compost.
So it's like a natural way to get rid of the stubble without burning it.
Exactly, and it even improves the soil.
Well, it's kind of like a win-win.
Exactly, 2 birds, 1 stone.
But I'm guessing there are challenges.
Always, with anything big like this.
What are some of the challenges with these biodecomposers?
Well, you have to get the farmers to use them.
That makes sense.
That means educating them about the benefits, maybe even giving them some financial help to make it easy. Right.
And then there's the logistics of actually getting these biodecomposers to the farmers.
So it's not just about having the solution, it's about making it work in the real world.
Absolutely. Implementation is key.
And this brings us back to the whole policy and implementation thing.
Yes.
We have the NCAP, a plan to fight pollution, but the report seems to suggest that it's not quite working as well as it could.
Yeah, and this is where those critical thinking skills come in, the kind you'll need for your UPSC essays.
Right.
The report acknowledges what NCAP is trying to do, but it also points out the problems with how it's being put into action.
So it's like you have a great study plan for your UPSC exams, but you don't actually follow it.
Exactly. You need to put in the work consistently and adapt as you go.
And that's exactly what we're going to get into in the next part of this deep dive, looking into those implementation challenges and how to turn good policies into real results.
Looking forward to it.
See you there. And we're back. All right, so we've talked about some of the big problems India is facing with air quality.
But now let's switch gears and talk about solutions because, that's where things get really interesting, especially for those of you prepping for the UPSC.
Absolutely. This is where you really get to think like a policymaker.
Right.
Imagine you get an essay question in your mains exam asking you to analyze India's strategy for tackling air pollution.
Yeah.
This report gives you the framework to do just that.
Okay, so it's not just about knowing the facts, it's about using them to build arguments, propose solutions.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's take Delhi, for example.
Right.
We've already talked about how its location and the weather make it really susceptible to pollution.
Yes.
So how do we deal with those specific challenges? What kind of policies could actually make a difference?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. What comes to mind when you look at what the report's saying?
Well, one thing that jumps out is the focus on using data to make decisions.
Okay.
The report talks about real-time monitoring systems to keep track of pollution levels and pinpoint where it's coming from. That kind of detailed data is super important for coming up with targeted solutions.
So it's not just saying, oh, Delhi has pollution. It's about knowing exactly where it's coming from and tailoring the solutions to that specific source.
That's it.
Okay.
For example, if the data shows that a particular industrial area is causing a spike in particulate matter, the authorities can then implement stricter emission rules for those industries, maybe even fines for those who don't comply.
So it's about moving away from those one-size-fits-all policies and getting more precise, using evidence to guide our actions.
Exactly.
Now, the report also talks about the need to enforce the rules we already have more strictly.
Oh, absolutely. That's key.
Because you can have the best policies in the world.
Right.
But if no one's following them,
It's pointless.
yeah, it's like studying really hard for your UPSC exams, but then not showing up on exam day.
Ouch.
Right. All that effort wasted.
That's a good way to put it.
So how do we make enforcement better? What does the report suggest?
Well, it talks about a few things. One is strengthening monitoring, not just at the city level, but also at the source. Like having systems in place to continuously monitor emissions from industries.
Got it.
Or even using satellites to keep an eye on crop stubble burning.
So basically making sure that those who are polluting know they're being watched.
Exactly. Accountability is important.
And then there's the matter of penalties.
Right.
The report suggests making the fines for violations much higher.
If it costs more to pollute than to follow the rules, people are more likely to clean up their act.
Yeah, it's like those big fines for traffic violations. They make you think twice before breaking the rules.
Exactly. A little bit of deterrence can go a long way.
But it's not just about punishment, right?
No, not at all.
There's also this element of awareness and collaboration.
Absolutely.
Public awareness campaigns are important to change people's behavior.
Right. You have to make people understand that this issue affects them directly.
Like, remember those anti-smoking ads that talked about the health risks? They are really effective in changing people's minds.
Yes, they were a game changer.
So it's about helping people realize that air pollution isn't just some abstract environmental problem.
It's personal.
It directly affects their health and well-being.
And their families.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not just about individual behavior either.
Right.
It's also about getting different groups to work together.
So what would that look like?
Well, involving local communities in monitoring efforts. Working with farmers to find more sustainable ways to farm.
Makes sense.
Partnering with industries to find innovative ways to reduce emissions.
So it's about creating this sense of shared responsibility.
Right. We're all in this together.
We all have a role to play.
Exactly.
Okay. The report also talks about the need to look beyond India's borders.
Yes, that's important.
Air pollution doesn't stop at national boundaries.
It doesn't care about maps.
Right. It's a global issue.
And India can learn a lot from other countries that have successfully tackled this problem.
Okay, so what's an example of something that's worked well elsewhere that we could maybe adapt here in India?
Well, one example is something called congestion pricing.
Congestion pricing. Tell me more.
It's basically a system where you get charged a fee to drive into certain areas during peak hours.
Interesting.
Cities like London and Singapore have done this.
Okay.
It discourages people from driving when it's busiest, which reduces traffic and pollution.
Makes sense.
Plus, the money from those fees can be used to improve public transport.
So it's like incentivizing people to use more sustainable modes of transport.
Exactly.
Could something like that work in Delhi? I mean, it's a very different city.
It's definitely an option worth exploring.
Yeah.
But of course, any policy has to be looked at carefully in the Indian context.
Right.
We have to think about things like affordability, the infrastructure we already have, and whether people would actually accept it.
It's kind of like when you're studying different governance models for the UPSC.
Right.
You learn about the pros and cons,
Yeah.
but then you have to figure out what would actually work here in India.
Absolutely. You have to adapt it to our specific needs and circumstances.
Now, it's not just about borrowing ideas from other countries.
Right.
It's also about actively participating in global discussions, working with other countries.
Sharing knowledge, best practices, maybe even technology.
Because at the end of the day, we all need to work together to solve this problem.
Exactly. Global challenges require global cooperation.
Okay, let's talk about the impact of all of this on people's lives, the socioeconomic angle.
Yes, that's crucial.
Because this isn't just about the environment.
Right.
It's about people's health, their livelihoods.
The report highlights the huge cost of air pollution.
Yeah,
Not just healthcare expenses, but also lost productivity.
I can imagine.
They estimate that air pollution costs India over 3% of its GDP every year.
3%? Wow, that's a massive amount of money.
It is, and it shows how urgent this issue is.
Right.
Think about it from a policy perspective.
Yep.
If we invest in cleaner technologies,
Yeah.
promote renewable energy, improve public transport, we not only reduce pollution, but we also create jobs and boost the economy.
So it's about finding solutions that benefit everyone.
Exactly. Win-win situations.
Now, you mentioned something earlier about interministerial collaboration. Explain what you meant by that.
Sure. Tackling air pollution isn't just the job of one ministry.
Right.
It requires teamwork.
Okay.
The Ministry of Environment needs to work with other ministries like transport, industry, energy, even agriculture.
So it's about recognizing that what one ministry does can affect other sectors.
Exactly.
If you're a civil servant working on a policy for industrial development, for example,
Right.
you can't just focus on economic growth.
You have to think about the environmental impact.
How will those industries affect pollution levels?
And how can you minimize any negative effects?
It's about taking a holistic view, understanding that everything is connected.
Absolutely. That's the key.
And that's why this deep dive is so valuable for UPSC aspirants.
It gives you a framework for analyzing complex issues,
All right, connecting the dots.
coming up with well-rounded solutions.
This is exactly the kind of thinking the UPSC is looking for.
Absolutely. It's about showing that you can think critically and creatively.
And remember, this is just scratching the surface.
This report is full of insights that can help you with your UPSC preparation.
So dive into it, analyze it, extract those key takeaways that'll set you apart in the exam.
You've got this.
All right, we've covered a lot in this section.
We have.
When we come back, we'll wrap things up with some key takeaways for our UPSC aspirants and give you some food for thought as you continue your studies. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the World Air Quality Report 2024. We've gone through the problems, looked at some potential solutions, and even, touched on how all this affects people's lives and the economy.
Yeah, a lot to unpack.
Yeah, there is. But now, let's try to boil it all down to some key takeaways for our UPSC aspirants.
Okay, so here's the main thing to keep in mind. This report, it's not just a bunch of numbers and charts. It's a guide to understanding this complex issue, one that's really tied to how India develops. And for anyone trying to crack the UPSC, it's like a treasure chest of potential essay topics, current affairs questions, even stuff that could pop up in the prelims.
So how can our listeners actually use this report to, give them an edge in their UPSC prep? What are those golden nuggets they should be looking for?
Okay, first off, you got to understand the trends. Yeah, India's air quality is a big problem, but the report also shows that things are getting better.
Yeah.
Be ready to talk about both sides, the bad and the good, because that shows you really get the issue.
It's about seeing the whole picture, right?
Yeah.
Not just focusing on the negative, but also recognizing what's working.
Exactly. And don't just spit out facts, dig deeper, ask why. Like, why is Delhi always the most polluted capital? Why is crop stubble burning such a big deal?
So it's about going beyond just knowing the facts and really explaining the reasons behind things.
That's it, showing that deeper level of analysis.
Yeah, like those explain or analyze questions you get in the UPSC mains.
Exactly. And that's where the report's breakdown of pollution sources comes in handy.
Yeah.
It helps you connect the dots between all these different factors, from the weather to how we farm to what's happening in our industries.
It's like building a mental map of the whole problem, seeing how everything fits together.
That's a great way to think about it.
Now, let's talk about the policy side.
Yeah.
The report looks at the National Clean Air Program, the NCAP. It points out the good stuff and the not-so-good stuff.
Right, it's a balanced view.
And that's super important for your UPSC prep because it lets you show that you understand the challenges of governing, the roadblocks to putting policies into action, and the need for creative solutions.
You need to be able to say, okay, here's the policy, here's what it's trying to do, but here's where it's falling short, and here's how we can fix it.
That's what the UPSC examiners are looking for, that kind of sharp analysis.
Absolutely. They want problem solvers, not just people who can memorize facts.
Okay, so this report is basically like a crash course in how to analyze environmental policy, specifically for the UPSC.
You got it. And don't just stick to India. The report talks about how air pollution crosses borders. It's a global thing.
Right.
India can learn from what other countries have done.
So broaden your horizons, look at examples from around the world, see if we can adapt those lessons here.
Exactly. There's no need to reinvent the wheel.
And finally, remember, data is your friend. This report is full of it.
Use it.
Use those stats, those trends, those analyses to back up your arguments. Make your answers stronger and more convincing.
Evidence is everything.
So there you have it, folks. A deep dive into the World Air Quality Report 2024, all geared towards helping you ace the UPSC. And we used articles from the Indian Express and Hindustan Times to put all this together.
Great sources.
Yeah, remember, this is just the starting point. Dig deeper, connect the dots, think critically, and form your own informed opinions.
And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah, and leave a comment below if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future deep dives. Until then, happy studying and best of luck with your UPSC journey.